Today we are going to talk about jiu-jitsu injuries. And how to avoid them. Howdy folks, Dr. Rob with Paragon Performance Physical Therapy here. Let's talk research. I want to share with you a study from 2021 by Hines et al. Entitled Injury Patterns, Risk Factors, and Return to Sport in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. First, do me a solid. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Hook it up, y'all. So, the study was an online questionnaire asking people to report recent injuries. And after surveying 1,140 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes, 90% of which were dudes, which makes sense. Jiu-Jitsu gyms are stereotypically sausage fests. I mean, yeah, you're still gonna come across badass chicks that'll tear your face off. But yeah, in general, it's a real brodeo out there. Here's what the study found. 68.8% of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes will suffer at least one injury that will take them out of sport for at least 2 weeks in every 3-year span. 45.7% of these injuries will be to the lower limb, usually to the knee, and 32.2% of these injuries will be to the upper limb, usually to the shoulder. Here's where the information starts getting more useful for you though. 77% of these injuries are suffered while sparring, split almost equally between passing guard, takedowns, and submissions, with submissions accounting for slightly more than the other two. Only about 10% of the injuries reported were suffered during competition, and that makes sense if you consider how much time any given athlete is going to spend training compared to competing. As you might expect, 78.9% of injuries suffered during a submission are suffered by, wait for it, the person being submitted. So breaking it down, you're most likely to suffer a leg injury while you're being submitted during sparring sessions. So what does all this mean for you? Well, for one, it means tap early, tap often, and leave your ego at the door. That's the first piece of advice that I was given when I started jiu-jitsu, and I think it's still the most useful information that I've gotten. If you got no chill, if you refuse to tap, well, you're probably gonna get injured, which is silly. I mean, that's like Jimi Hendrix lighting his guitar on fire and smashing it on stage during a sound check. Like, bro, that's not what this is for, dude. Second takeaway is most injuries are suffered to the leg. Be careful with your leg locks. Learn proper technique, learn proper defense, and go slow when you're finishing a leg lock. There's actually a really good video that I saw between Joe Rogan and Jean-Jacques Machado where they talk about leg locks specifically. I'll put the link to the video down below, but essentially they say exactly that. Leg locks are very powerful. They can be dangerous in the hands of less experienced athletes. And if somebody doesn't know how to properly defend against one or doesn't tap out, their knee is gonna get wound up and it is gonna get blown apart.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Just like that. Point number 3 is to make sure that you're cross-training for strength and mobility. It's important to note that this study did ask its respondents what they were using for preventative measures, which included things like mobility training, strength training, taking naps, having a vegan diet, and it actually didn't find any correlation between number of injuries and injury prevention strategies. So according to the data gathered by this study, there's no effective means for preventing injuries in jiu-jitsu. It's also worth noting, however, that this study wasn't about prevention, right? It gathered that information as kind of a peripheral data point, but it didn't look into it, didn't do a deep dive, it just kind of asked the questions and took yes and no answers. This is by no means a definitive study on what works, what doesn't work for injury prevention in jiu-jitsu. Look, I'll throw this proposition a bone that there's no way to prevent injuries in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a combat sport, it's not fucking badminton. If somebody sinks a vicious rear naked choke or a kimura or a heel hook on you, that's checkmate, and I don't care how strong you are, you can't break the laws of physics. But that's also kind of why I reject this notion that there's no way to prevent injury. You can't break the laws of physics, but also the laws of biology exist, right? Human physiology, human sport physiology is a well-studied and a well-understood field, and injury prevention for almost every other sport looks exactly like strength and conditioning training and a mobility practice. Amongst other things, of course. Yeah, I know I'm super biased towards this stuff. I've been in the field since I was like 20, 21, 22, but part of why I'm biased is because I'm very versed in the research and I understand what works. And this shit works for everything else. So if strength and conditioning and a mobility practice doesn't help prevent injuries in jiu-jitsu, then jiu-jitsu is a unique sport as far as athletics and injury prevention are concerned. Another thing to consider though is this. If two athletes are equally matched for skill, then it's gonna be the stronger, more mobile, more athletic of the two that's gonna prevail and is going to submit the other. So avoiding injury with jiu-jitsu might look like avoiding submissions and being successful with your own submissions. And again, matched for skill, this is gonna come down to strength and conditioning and mobility. Point number 4, don't let anything that I've said so far dissuade you from starting or continuing with jiu-jitsu. And the skills, confidence, and body awareness that you gain from the practice of Brazilian jiu-jitsu are priceless. Especially with the world in its current state of, let's say, spiciness. Yes, according to the research, in any given 3-year period, you're likely to suffer an injury. But here's the deal. Nobody makes it out of here in one piece. If you're lying on your deathbed with pristine joints, with no low back pain, and your neck moves like a Swiss watch, I mean, I'd say you did it wrong. In order to die with pristine joints, you'll have to say no to almost anything that's valuable and worth your time in this life. And by that I mean work, and I mean risk, and I mean struggle, because ultimately that is what life is. It is struggle. And that's what makes Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and combat sports so valuable. You make struggle a habit. You systemize struggle. You volunteer to struggle, and the more you do that, the better you get at dealing with it. Which is maybe why the people that roll Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tend to be so at peace with the world. Because those dudes and dudettes are struggling for fun. They love that shit. That's good stuff. Okay, that's enough pontificating for me for now. If you have any questions or comments, fire them off below. Otherwise, like, share, subscribe, etc. And thank you so much for watching.